The most influential presidents had clear goals, solid platforms, and a willingness to collaborate with their political and military rivals to achieve peaceful compromises. Often, they demonstrated resilience and strategic prowess, which allowed them to overcome adversity and leave lasting legacies. On the flip side, the least influential presidents, despite their aspirations, were hindered by a series of situational and behavioral obstacles that stifled their potential. In many cases, personal missteps, unfavorable political climates, or tragic events kept their administrations from achieving greatness. Take William Henry Harrison, for example. His term was so brief that it almost escaped the history books. Elected in 1840, he was the last U.S. president born before the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Harrison's time in office was cut tragically short after only 32 days, the shortest presidential term in U.S. history. Ironically, while his presidency was brief, his inaugural address remains the longest ever given, stretching over 2 hours, containing 8,445 words. His friend and fellow Whig, Daniel Webster, had already trimmed the speech down from an even lengthier manuscript. Unfortunately, his insistence on proving his vitality by riding a horse without a coat or hat during his rainy inauguration likely contributed to his demise. Though many believed pneumonia from this exposure killed him, he didn't fall ill until weeks later and passed on April 4, 1841. Harrison's death thrust the U.S. government into an awkward and unprecedented situation. At the time, there was no formal procedure in place for presidential succession. The Constitution vaguely stated that the vice president would assume presidential duties, but it left open the question of whether the vice president became president or was merely acting president. Congress debated the issue, and eventually, John Tyler was sworn in as the next president. John Tyler's presidency was marked by ongoing conflict with the Whig Party, despite being a member of it. Tyler quickly demonstrated that he would not conform to the party's platform, particularly when he vetoed 2 bills aimed at reviving the National Bank, a central Whig policy. His actions led to the resignation of his entire cabinet, except for Secretary of State Daniel Webster. In response, Tyler was expelled from the Whig Party. Later, the House of Representatives attempted to impeach him, but the effort failed due to the 2/3 requirement. Despite surviving impeachment, Tyler's presidency suffered, and he faced certain defeat in the 1844 election. Tyler's final years were spent as a delegate for the Confederacy during the Civil War, but he passed away before the war ended, leaving his political legacy largely diminished. Then there was Zachary Taylor, a military man who reluctantly entered politics. Before becoming the 12th President of the United States, Taylor had built a distinguished career in the military, fighting in the War of 1812 and leading American forces to victory during the Mexican-American War. However, Taylor was initially disinterested in politics and hesitant to accept the Whig Party's nomination. Despite his reluctance, he was elected in 1848. Once in office, Taylor struggled with his transition from military life to the political arena. He took months to form his cabinet, and his time in office was plagued by illness. His death on July 9, 1850, after consuming raw fruit, ended his presidency prematurely. His sudden passing fueled rumors that he had been poisoned, though this theory remains unproven. Taylor's short time in office and his lack of decisive political action have placed him among the least influential presidents in U.S. history. His successor, Millard Fillmore, assumed the presidency upon Taylor's death. His tenure is mostly remembered for the Compromise of 1850, a series of bills designed to address the issue of slavery in new territories acquired after the Mexican-American War. The Compromise admitted California as a free state, while strengthening the Fugitive Slave Act, a controversial law that required escaped slaves to be returned to their owners even if they reached free states. Fillmore's decision to support the Compromise alienated him from both pro-slavery and anti-slavery factions, fracturing the Whig Party. His administration's failure to effectively address the growing national divide over slavery has led historians to view Filmore as one of the least effective presidents. Another president who faced immense challenges was Franklin Pierce. Elected as the 14th president, Pierce inherited a nation deeply divided over the issue of slavery. His decision to sign the Kansas-Nebraska Act in 1854 only intensified these divisions. The act allowed settlers in those territories to decide for themselves whether to permit slavery, effectively nullifying the Missouri Compromise, which had prohibited slavery in certain territories. The result was increased sectional conflict and violence, exemplified by the events known as Bleeding Kansas, where pro-slavery and anti-slavery settlers clashed violently. Pierce's inability to unite the country and his failure to prevent the worsening tensions over slavery have earned him a spot among the least successful U.S. presidents. James Buchanan, Pierce's successor, is often ranked as one of the worst presidents in American history. Serving from 1857 to 1861, Buchanan's presidency is largely remembered for his failure to address the secession crisis. A staunch supporter of states' rights, Buchanan believed that the federal government had no authority to prevent states from seceding. His inaction during the secession of southern states, coupled with his administration's involvement in various scandals, including the purchase of votes to pass pro-slavery legislation, only deepened the divisions that would lead to the Civil War. By the time Abraham Lincoln was inaugurated in 1861, 7 southern states had already left the Union. Buchanan's successor, Abraham Lincoln, is remembered as one of the most influential presidents, but his vice president and eventual successor, Andrew Johnson, fared much worse. Johnson, a Southern Democrat who remained loyal to the Union, became president after Lincoln's assassination in 1865. He faced the daunting task of leading the nation through Reconstruction, but his policies, which were lenient toward the former Confederate states, alienated Congress. Johnson opposed the 14th Amendment, which granted citizenship to former slaves, and he repeatedly vetoed Reconstruction legislation designed to protect the rights of African Americans. His clashes with Congress culminated in his impeachment, making him the first U.S. president to be impeached. Though Johnson was acquitted by 1 vote in the Senate, his presidency is generally regarded as a failure, and his legacy has been overshadowed by his opposition to civil rights for African Americans. Ulysses S Grant, who followed Johnson as president, faced his own set of challenges. While Grant is often lauded for his efforts to combat the Ku Klux Klan and protect the rights of African Americans during Reconstruction, his administration was plagued by corruption scandals. The Panic of 1873, a financial crisis that led to a severe economic depression, further tarnished his presidency. Although Grant's military leadership during the Civil War earned him a place in American history, His presidency is remembered as a period of political and financial instability. Warren G. Harding, elected in 1920, also faced scandals that would ultimately define his presidency. His administration is best known for the Teapot Dome scandal, in which members of his cabinet, known as the Ohio Gang, accepted bribes in exchange for leasing government oil reserves to private companies. Though Harding himself was not directly involved, the scandal severely damaged his reputation. Harding died in office in 1923, and his legacy has been marred by corruption and cronyism. Finally, Richard Nixon's presidency was one of great contrasts. On the one hand, he opened diplomatic relations with China and negotiated arms control agreements with the Soviet Union. On the other hand, his involvement in the Watergate scandal, in which members of his re-election committee broke into Democratic Party headquarters and attempted to cover up their actions, led to his resignation in 1974. Nixon remains the only U.S. president to resign from office, and while his foreign policy achievements are significant, the Watergate scandal has forever tainted his legacy. As history unfolds, the legacies of U.S. presidents continue to be re-examined. Will time and new historical perspectives shift some of these figures from the least to the most effective presidents? Only time will tell. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this content and want to see more, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more in-depth historical analyses.